guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Callie, and today I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. It's a little past the mid-year point, and I'm pretty sure I forgot to do this tag last year as well, but I really like this tag. I think it's a lot of fun, so I figured I would do it better late than never. The mid-year book freakout tag is just a way to look back at the past 6 months or a little extra of my reading. There's several prompts and I'm just gonna go through them. I tried my best not to do duplicates for this one because I have read so many books so far this year. I believe I'm at 150 thus far. My goal for this year was 175, so I think I'm good. But yeah, I've been reading a ton this year. The first prompt is the best book that you have read this year. I had a couple books come into mind when I saw this prompt, but the one that stuck out the most to me was The Ivory Key by Raman. This is a fantastic debut and an overall fantastic story. This follows a set of siblings who go on one last mission together to try and discover the Ivory Key, which will bring magic back to their lands. It has so many different sibling dynamics. It has a lot of political issues as well as a ton of action being based in Arabian folklore. I loved this story. It was so immersive. The characters were all really unique as well as extremely dynamic and vibrant. They popped off the page. And I think about this book all the time. I really want the sequel to drop now, but it doesn't drop until January of 23. Next prompt is the best sequel I've read. For me, the top ones were Fire Falling and Crystal Crowned, which these are both sequels in the Air Awakened series by Elise Kova. I adored this series, and I've been slowly getting the hardcover editions because they've got this really cool art on each of the hardcovers, so very excited about that. I only have, I think, books 1 through 3 so far, but I love the Air Awakened series. I devoured the entire 5-book series in the span of a weekend and adored it. It is an Avatar: The Last Airbender type story where we have a girl who discovers that she has wind magic when all of the wind mages were killed. I believe it was like 50 years prior to the story. And she then becomes a tool to her kingdom and a soldier, and we go through so many different phases throughout the entire book series. And Fire Falling and Crystal Crown were definitely my favorite two in the entire book, and the entire series. Up next is a new release that you want to read. For me, the one that I gravitated towards is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. This book just dropped a couple weeks ago, and I love Riley Sager's writing. I try and read all of their books in like the October time period because they're all very spooky. And this is their newest release. So this follows a woman who I believe is just recently widowed and is dealing with an addiction. So she goes to this cabin to try and find herself and becomes obsessed with the couple next door. She watches them, she kind of inserts herself into their lives, and then one day she sees a fight, and then the wife is missing. So she goes on this personal quest to try and figure out who did it and prove that it was the husband. So this sounds like it could be really interesting, and I know that Riley Sager is very famous for their red herrings, and I just hope there are a ton of them in here because I am ready to be pulled in every direction possible. The next prompt is the most anticipated releases for the second half of the year. I have 2 for this one, and one is a romance, one is a fantasy. The romance that I have is Love on the Brain by Hazelwood. I adore Hazelwood's writing. I've been obsessed ever since I read The Love Hypothesis. I've listened to all the audiobooks for the STEMinist novels, and I will buy anything that woman writes now. The fantasy that I'm most excited for is Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn. This is the sequel to Legendborn, which came out, I believe, 2 years ago. I fell in love with this story. It is a modern day Arthur retelling where there is the whole court of Arthur in modern day. It's very reincarnation-esque where the knight is hiding within and is only called upon in times of crisis. So we have our Merlin, we have a Lancelot, we have all of these characters, and It is one of the most unique Arthur retellings that I've read, and I adored it, and I've been dying for this sequel. I do plan on rereading the first book again because it has been 2 years. I read Legendborn right when it came out, so I will definitely want to refamiliarize myself with the story once that comes out. Up next is the biggest disappointment so far. So again, I have two. The first one is Blood Countess by Lana Popovic. I was really excited. This was supposed to be a fun retelling of the historical figure of the woman who killed all of her servants, bathed in their blood. I was really excited to jump into it. I ended up DNFing this book because I was so bored. I think I got to page 100, nothing happened, and I was dead bored the entire time. So unfortunately, it did not live up to the hype I was expecting. The second book that I have is Escaping from Houdini by Kerri Maniscalco. This book was so not needed in this series. I hated the main character within this book. She was so aggravating. Literally all this book was the miscommunication trope and the I can do it on my own kind of thing. And it was so aggravating to just watch her be stupid the entire time. And this entire book, nothing happened. Like, I was expecting cool magic tricks, a lot of sleight of hand, all that stuff, and I honestly could not tell you what the plot of this book was. Besides the fact of it, Audrey Rose being dumb. Bit disappointed. I liked the other books in this series, which is why I still have a copy of this book. And I don't want to break up the series because I did like the other three. Next prompt is the biggest surprise so far of this year. For me, that was Verity by Colleen Hoover. This is very different from all of Colleen Hoover's other works. All of her other works are more heavy on the romance. While there is romance in this story, it is more of a thriller, mystery, suspense type story where we are following a struggling writer who is asked to ghostwrite for a very famous author because she has been in an accident and she cannot finish the series. So she ends up going to live with the widower and their son, and he's gone through all these tragedies with his twin daughters dying and then his wife getting into this car accident, and she finds this manuscript of a biography of this woman and starts reading it and realizes what an awful person this woman is. And while at the same time kind of falling for her husband, and it's a whole thing. It's insane. And the last 5 pages, I was so surprised by the end of this book. If you've read it, you know. And it's just mind-boggling how insane this story is. Next is new favorite author. I talked about this a little bit, but that is Hazelwood. I read The Love Hypothesis earlier this year, following a PhD student who, to trick her friend into thinking she has a social life, kisses the first guy that comes in, and it is the cold-hearted professor, and they end up in this fake dating romance, and it is so cute and adorable, full of science puns, and I was here for it the entire time. As well as, like I said, I listened to all of the feminist novels, which were cute little novellas following 3 different friends in 3 different romantic scenarios, and those were really fun to listen to. I got a lot of enjoyment out of them, and I love the scientist aspect of this. Up next is newest fictional crush. I ended up picking Simon from Well Met by Jen Deluca. He's the main male love interest in this story, which this is a Ren Fair romance. And what I love about Simon is during the rest of the year, he is this broody, tough grading English teacher at a high school. But during the summer, he is a pirate and goes full send into the pirate persona. And I adore the flip-flop of his professional life versus his Ren Fair life. And I just thought he was a really fun, well-developed, dynamic character, and I love him. He was just so fun. Up next is newest favorite character. So for me, I ended up picking Joan from Only a Monster by Vanessa Lynn. This book surprised me so much because I usually don't gravitate towards the time travel-y stories, but this one, she's accidentally thrust in time, and it gave me a lot of Doctor Who vibes meets Outlander. And Joan is just so headstrong, and what I loved about her character is most YA protagonists, when they're thrust into a situation, all they do is whine about it until a big strong man comes and helps them. What Joan does is she takes the man in said scenario and demands answers. And I love that she takes charge immediately. Joan was a really cool character, and I adored this story. I am so excited for the rest of this series. I just fell in love with this. The next prompt is a book that made you cry. Again, I have 2 for this. The first one being Still by Kennedy Ryan. This is the 3rd book in the Grip series, which is a contemporary romance series. What I liked about this one is all 3 books actually followed the same couple, going through different phases of their relationship. Still hurt me in a way I was not prepared for. And I adored this entire series. I just love the characters. We're following a aspiring rapper and essentially his manager, who is also his best friend's sister. And they have this immaculate chemistry, but refuse to acknowledge it. And we obviously follow their romance from there, but still, Grip was mainly their romance and the happily ever after, whatever. Still was almost like, it looked like it was supposed to be an epilogue, but ended up becoming a full-length book. And I'm really glad that it did. It wasn't just a couple of pages at the end of Grip, because Still was just so beautifully done and heart-wrenching to read, but highly recommend this. These are definitely one of my favorite fictional couples that I've ever read. The other book that made me cry is Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. This was just, this is the 2nd book in the Bellinger sister duology, I guess. They're just companion romance novels. But for this one, it was the epilogue that got me, because instead of the usual 5 months later, a year later kind of epilogue, we got a 10 years later, and Tessa Bailey was able to wrap up not only Hannah's story with Fox, but as well as her sister Piper and Brennan's. And it was so heartwarming. Thinking about it just makes me so happy. And they were happy tears, but they were tears nonetheless. Up next is the books that made you happy. Again, I picked 2, one romance, one fantasy. The romance that made me happy was Dating Dr. Dill by Nisha Sharma. I just love the more scientific characters. I love that that's becoming more of a thing. And this story was so cute with the family dynamics, and it was just a lot more complex than other romances that I've read. And I think that complexity with the families, with the culture, adds so much to the story, and I adored every second of it. For the fantasy, The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie. I loved this book. It's exactly as the title says, The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. Our main character decides to sacrifice herself to save her brother's lover, essentially so her brother will be happy. And she is then thrust into the kingdom of the gods and finds out that the sea god is cursed. And she has to find a way to prevent more sacrifices as well as free the sea god from his curse. This was so beautifully written. The reason it made me happy was just the atmosphere. The entire story is underwater, and it's just so beautiful, filled with rich lore and backstory. It's a single standalone book. It's a beautiful book as well. And just everything about this, the characters, the dynamics, the romance, the plot. It was all so well executed and just made me happy from start to finish. The next prompt is favorite book to film, book to screen adaptation. I picked Confess for this one by Colleen Hoover. This was a small web series that I actually didn't know existed until I was reviewing the book and saw the mini-series cover for the book. And I ended up being able to find it on Amazon and binge through it, and it is one of the best book to screen adaptations I have ever seen. And I would highly recommend it if you liked this. This follows a young woman who finds this artist who takes people's confessions that are totally anonymous and paints them. And it was such a beautiful story. This is definitely straight up Colleen Hoover, very romance, very contemporary, very heart-wrenching towards the end, and of course with a huge plot twist. I loved the book. I loved the web series. They were taking lines directly from the book. They changed like 1 or 2 aspects, but it wasn't implicated in the plot or any of those kinds of aspects, and I liked the changes that they made. The next prompt is a favorite review you've written. For this one was a bit harder to pick, but I ended up going with House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas, because this writing this review was so hard, which is why it made it my favorite, because there is such a huge plot twist with this story, and so many. It's a huge book. It took me a good literal full day to read it. It was so hard to write this review without spoiling everything, and I adore this. I need book 3 immediately with how insane this story went, and it went into a direction I wasn't even remotely thinking about. So really excited to see where the next books in the series go, and I can't say much without giving it away. Next prompt is the most beautiful books bought this year, and for this one I had a lot of options because I had a lot of really pretty books that I ended up getting, because I do Fairy Loot as well as Owl Crate, and they come out with some of the most gorgeous books, but I think my favorite was Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. This is just a stunning book. Like, we have the sprayed edges that are just gorgeous. We have the end pages with art. Everything about this book is gorgeous, and I adored it. I liked the book. It wasn't spectacular. I did enjoy it, but I love this cover so much, and the entire book is beautiful. I do have a second one for this prompt, only because I actually just got this, and this is a book I've been hunting for several years, and I finally found one in my price range. I actually didn't even technically pay for it. I ended up trading one of my special editions that I have already. I ended up being able to find a copy of the original cover of Throne of Glass. This is a first edition. They are very hard to find because there is the new covers, but I've been hunting for this. This is the last book I needed in my Sarah J. Maas collection, so now that collection is fully complete, and I'm really happy about it. Honestly, the only thing that would make this book better is if it's signed, and if Sarah J. Maas ever goes on tour again, I will definitely be bringing this book to get signed, because then it'll just be chef's kiss perfect. The final prompt are books that I want to read by the end of the year. For me, this is finishing out series. And throughout the entire year, I've been finishing at least one series per month, whether trilogy, duology. I haven't touched my quartets yet, but the top ones that I have is the Aurora cycle by Amie Kaufman and J. Kristoff. I'm actually listening to Aurora Rising currently on audiobook, so I can hopefully get through that one. The other one is the Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. R.F. Kuang has Babel coming out soon, so I want to finish that series first before I jump into Babel. I'm also really excited for Light in the Flame by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the second book in the Shadow and the Ember series. I am fully caught up on the whole From Blood and Ash world. I was able to finally get to War of Two Queens last month or the month before. Everything blurs together at this point, but I really liked Sarah and Nyktos' story, so I'm really excited about this book. And the last one that I have is the Blood Heir series. I love the Blood Heir series. It is a dark Anastasia retelling, and I've adored every single book that has come out. I've read the first two, and I got a copy of the final book from the Illumicrate collection for this. They're gorgeous books. So I'm really excited to dive into this series and finish it, especially because Amelia Wenzhou has a new series dropping. I believe it's either later this year or early next year that I'm very excited to jump into. Overall, I just want to be caught up on series. I have so many series that I just need to keep up with. So for me, I've been doing audiobooks just because I don't have the time, and I love doing my rereads through audiobooks because I know the story and I can just kind of zone in and out while I'm at work and listen to them. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And that is the mid-year book freakout tag. This was really fun to kind of gather all the books for and film. So thanks you guys for watching. Please feel free to leave comments. We post videos every Tuesday, Thursday with the occasional Sunday. And I will see you guys in our next video. Bye!